And welcome back. My first guest is Brian Jennings, the head of adult services at the New City Library. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Supervisor, for having me.
So, Brian, I'm delighted to have you here, and I know we're going to talk a good bit about some initiatives that you've undertaken and the library's undertaken that have really been noteworthy for the people of Rockland County and Clarkstown, specifically the oral history and some of the other projects we've done with the little library over at Tremond's. But before we get to those, let's have our viewers, give them the opportunity to learn a little bit about you. So, Brian, maybe you can give us a little bit of a sketch of your background, where you're from, and how you got to the New City Library.
Yeah, people often ask me how long I've been in Rockland, and I've been in Rockland for about 20 years. I've lived in Clarkstown since 2007. My wife and I were in Valley Cottage, and about 2 years ago we moved to West Nyack. But I'm originally from McKeesport, Pennsylvania, and my brother brought me here. He was living in Nyack and helped me get a job at Nyack College, and at that time I started to get my degree in library science and archives, and I moved on to work for a film company called Kuhnhart Productions, and we were cataloging 19th century photographs. The family had bought the glass plate negatives of Matthew Brady. I moved on from there to Pace University. In the meantime, I'd worked at the Nyack Library, and I eventually moved to the Nyack Library full-time as a local history librarian, and then came to New City as their local history librarian. And for the last year, I've been the head of adult services at New City Library.
Well, and I know you've done some tremendous work at the New City Library. And what got you really interested, in getting into working in a library? It's not a typical career path.
Yeah, I had a degree in history, and after college, I didn't have a job. I had interned at the Historical Society of Western Pennsylvania as a docent, taking people through tours. Actually, the Historical Society of Western Pennsylvania is in an old ice house.
Really?
So that kind of connects to Rockland with the Rockland Lake ice. So I actually saw what one of those ice houses looked like inside. In any case, there was a whole floor of people who worked there, the 6th floor, which nobody really, you couldn't get there on the elevator sort of thing, that was library and archives. So it occurred to me that maybe that would be a career path, so I started to look into that. In the meantime, a job opened up in my local public library, which was a Carnegie Library. And so that's how I got started in the library field.
Right. It's and as I said, starting off, I mean, you've done some great things, and the New City Library really is a tremendous resource here within our community, and some of the history of our town and our county and our region really have been compiled and collected there throughout the years. The Rockland Room has some great resources, but there's a great project that you're spearheading, the Oral History Project. Maybe you could tell our viewers a little bit about the Oral History Project.
So actually, when I was back at the Nyack Library, I became interested in oral history because we had old tapes, and we got a grant at that point to digitize those oral history tapes, and from there we began to collect oral histories, and that developed and kind of became a part of that grant. So that's where I was introduced to oral history. Then when I came to New City, I thought, well, that was something I did at Nyack. Maybe we don't necessarily need to do that here. We're focused on genealogy and things here. But at that time, I received an award from the Orangetown Museum for the work I had done at Nyack, and I started to think, you know what, this is really important, and it doesn't matter. You can't do enough of this type of thing. So in the fall of 2014, we got a grant to interview, I believe it was 13 people, one from each town in Rockland, and many of them from Clarkstown, including Jim Cropsey, Jerry Donnellan, Bert Dahm. So some of the folks no longer with us. And so as a part of that, we brought someone in to do the interviews. Then it occurred to me, well, there's a lot more people we need to interview than just those 14. So we brought Eileen McAdam back from the Sound and Story Project of the Hudson Valley to train us on how to do oral history. So it's not simply me doing oral histories. I provided you with the list, and if you look at the top of that list, it's Robin Wren, who's helped us, Bob Goldberg, who lives in Valley Cottage. Elizabeth Bowler has done tremendous work with lots of old-timers in Nanuet. So we have a real crew of people who've been bringing these things in. So that's how it began. And really what we're doing is we're kind of doing life histories of people. So we want to know, just like you asked me where I was born, we start there, where people were born, what it was like growing up there, how they came to Rockland if they're not originally from Rockland. And if they are from Rockland, of course, some of the significant changes that people have seen over time here. So
tell me a little bit about just that process. So you have people that are doing it. How do they, is there a specific format that they have to use? And how do they go about, how long does it take?
Usually, if someone asks me, I'd say around an hour. Could be a little more, could be a little less. I've had interviews go 2 hours. Sometimes if it goes 2 hours, if it goes that long, you feel like I'm ready to end this. Sometimes I've had interviews go that long, and I say we could have kept going. That's kind of how it goes. Sometimes it's word of mouth. I'm going to be actually at the Clarkstown Senior Club at the street school next week. I've talked to other senior clubs there, and from that I've gotten people who've said they've been interested. We have a series of listening programs that we do around different themes, where people can come to the library and listen. They can also listen on our SoundCloud page to lists of stories, things like for Mother's Day, remembering Mom, or remembering Dad for Father's Day, or for veterans, we have a whole, the Library of Congress has developed a whole series of questions, which is really nice, so you can kind of follow that script. We've also done programs around Veterans Day. And initially when I started this, I kind of had an outline of themes with some possible questions. We really want to leave questions open-ended, not simply yes, no, but things that cause people to reflect and think, and we want their own memories of specific times, places, events. So that's generally the motto. As I've gone on and done more interviews, it's less about a script and it's more about themes. We have done a number of kind of mini projects too. We had an intern last summer who did 4 interviews with immigrants, Spanish-speaking immigrants, and actually 2 of the interviews she did in Spanish and translated them.
Oh, wow.
And so I think that was really unique to have that type of perspective. So the more interviews we have, now we have over 120, maybe 130. The more interviews I get, the more I start to look at the collection and who we've interviewed and think, well, we need different types of perspectives as well.
Right.
So, but really, anytime a World War II vet comes in or says that, I immediately make time to do that, because I realize that there aren't that many of those guys left around, and even Korean War for that matter.
No, it's one of the things that we've been doing here, Brian, and I know I mentioned to you off camera, on every one of these programs, we're now into, I think, this is our 35th episode, and we have 3 interview segments. One of those interview segments is always a veteran, and so we're kind of compiling our own oral history to a certain extent, because on the veteran segment, we asked them to speak a little bit about themselves, and a little bit about their service, and then their involvement in the community. And they're only typically 10 to 14 minutes long, but it's been great to have that reflection. And exactly as you said, now we're 3 years into this program, and there's a number of folks that we've interviewed that are no longer with us. So we've got that history that we've been able to kind of capture. So I commend you on that. In fact, I think it would be great. Let's give our viewers a snippet of what this project is about. And so I think we've selected two. The first one we're going to listen to is Jan Davies, and everybody knows about Davies Farm, and which has been here. But how long ago did you interview Jan?
It was probably about a year after her husband passed. It must have been around 2015, I believe. And she was very, very candid. And when people agree to be interviewed, it's really giving of themselves, their memories. So it's kind of a brave thing to do, in a sense, to kind of sit there. And she was just very open about losing her husband and how that affected the business, and how she never expected to be a farmer's wife, I guess. Was not prepared for that.
So let's take a listen. It's for our viewers. It's about a little over 3 minutes, and you'll hear a portion of the oral history of Jan Davies.
Hi, Jan Davies, and I was born April 20th, 1936 in the Mount Vernon Hospital, and I grew up in the Bronxville area. I had no idea what a farmer's wife should be doing. My father was a pharmacist. He had a big backyard garden, and I had no idea how all-encompassing it was going to be. And my husband was used to doing all of this, and he just expected me to step right in, and it took a lot of learning to do it. But I think that we eventually made a great team. Well, I think one of the tough things is that you get up in the morning and you've got your day planned, and then it rains or it does something and you can't do whatever you were supposed to do. Your time really isn't your own. It's dictated by what's going on the farm. One of the adjustments that I had to make was that your income is in the summer and then mainly in the fall. And the joke was that our children got their back-to-school clothes in November, when we had the money and the time to get their back-to-school clothes. All we did was the wholesale delivery. I took over from my mother-in-law, and we delivered to about 12 different retail stores, delis. We went from Stony Point, Congers, Valley Cottage, Nyack, and Piermont. Then we sold apples to the A&P, not the one in Valley Cottage. There was one up in Haverstraw. They would give you a receipt for what you brought to them, and then they wouldn't pay you until maybe a month later, and you really weren't getting much for it. So my husband and I decided to sell them ourselves by opening up a farm market. And then we opened up a second one, and then we started the Pick Your Own over at the Orchard. The men come in at 7. Whoever wants coffee gets, we make coffee, and we talk about what needs to be done. I'm still a novice at this, and the men, there's one guy that's worked for us for 41 years, and there's another one that's worked for us for like 12 or 15 years, and they sort of know the rhythm, and when things should be planted, and our sons are wonderful about that too, and everybody does different jobs with different machinery. They basically are teaching me, because my responsibility was the farm stands, hiring the kids, doing the scheduling, the pricing, the whatever. And my husband ran the farm, and he died in March, and the men were sort of floundering. We all were. And then I discovered that, the men needed direction. And so from then on, I've been, 7 o'clock, we meet in the kitchen and we discuss the day and just different things that I need done. And they're wonderful. I'm very, very lucky, because if it weren't for them, I couldn't continue, doing the farm.
Well, that's just great. Welcome back from that oral history. And Brian, I want to really thank you for helping to preserve, that history because, and Jan, in a very personal way, talks about her experience. And the Davies family has been an institution in Clarkstown for, 150 years or more. And it's just a tremendous opportunity for us to be able to kind of preserve that. There are a lot of folks in our community that are familiar with the Davies farm, but really the Davies family has been here for a very long period of time, and just being able to preserve that history. So I want to thank you for that. I think the next segment that we've taken a little listen to, we're about to take a listen to, is Bert Dahm. And I think what's great about this demonstrates the power of this program because unfortunately Bert Dahm, who was known as Mr. West Nyack to so many of us and was really involved with the Historical Society, with the foundation of the Heritage of West Nyack, civic group that has really made an effort and a focus to preserve the history and heritage of West Nyack. Bert's no longer with us, and thankfully you were able to get Bert's oral history, and now it's a living history that we'll have forever. Maybe you could just introduce our viewers to what they're about to listen to. It's a little over 2 minutes, this section that we've taken.
Yeah, so Bert is recalling growing up in West Nyack and what that was like. I think the more I talk to people around here, not only the building of the Tappan Zee Bridge, but also the loss by the creation, which we need water, right. So we needed to have that reservoir, but losing that kind of a playground for kids, and he recalls what that was like. And also, his family was involved with the quarry, so he talks a little bit about what it was like to grow up a quarry kid in West Nyack.
Oh, that's great. So we're going to take a pause, and we're going to listen to a little over 2 minutes of the oral history of the late Bert Dahm.
Okay, my name is Bert Dahm. Bert is short for Herbert, which is even shorter for J. Herbert, which is officially John Herbert. I was junior. My dad, of course, was senior. At home, he was called Herb. I became Bert. And here I am. I lived and have lived all my life in West Nyack. Initially, my folks lived up on Oak Terrace off of Route 304, then moved to the home they built on Strawtown Road, overlooking what was then the Hackensack Swamp, which later became, of course, Lake DeForest in the 1950s, but in the meantime provided a fantastic place for a young kid to grow up. At 12 years old, I had a .22 rifle and a .410 shotgun. Myself and the two neighbor kids would get down to the swamp, play around, shoot bullfrogs and black snakes, steal Charlie Lemon's duck boat that he had out there, paddle around. Absolutely wonderful place to grow up. I also was fortunate enough to be in the family of trap rock quarry operators. My dad owned and operated the West Nyack Trap Rock Quarry. So among other jobs I had as a young kid growing up is when we had a quarry blast to bring down this rock. We would set off somewhere between 1.5 and 2 tons of dynamite, which by today's standards is a colossal amount because of the concussion and noise and whatnot. But in those days, there wasn't anybody around. So I got to press the plunger like you see in the old-time westerns where the bad man gets up there and he pushes down on this plunger and boom, the explosion goes off, and then the shovels and trucks roll in to pick up the stone. So it was another great place to grow up. I mean, I had all kinds of fun things to do.
Well, that was just great. Brian, I want to again thank you. About about preserving this history. Not just with Jam, but with Bert, and just a wonderful opportunity. And as I said, Bert Dahm, for very many of us, the town put a plaque over at the Trapphagen property to commemorate Bert next to an evergreen tree that we planted there that the Heritage of West Nyack now decorates for the holidays. And Bert passed away just over a year ago, but he's gone but not forgotten. And thanks to you, none of these folks will be forgotten, because their oral histories will forever be part of the library collection, and folks can listen to these far and wide. So, Brian, tell our viewers how they can get involved in the Oral History Project. Are you accepting solicitations?
Certainly, if people would like to be interviewed, they can call the library, 634-4997. My extension's 127, and we can set up a time to be interviewed if you're willing to share of yourself, or if you just want to know a little bit more about the project. If you'd like to be trained to be a volunteer, or there's also a lot of work with the interview once you get it in.
Mm-hmm.
All these interviews are transcribed, and we've had some staff helping, but we could always use more help with that. And then all of the interviews eventually will be going to our digital collections at hrvh.org.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, they're also shared with the Digital Public Library of America, which is dp.la. And I think that's really one of the interesting things, is sharing these interviews with the world, or the country, in a sense, because then with the proper description, for example, if you were to search for Arthur B. Davies, you would see his artwork and books about him, letters, but you would also see Jan's interview and kind of the family connection. Or if you were to search for farming and things like that, you would see pictures, but you would also hear the stories of Jim Cropsey, Jan Davies, and other residents who have shared those sorts of things. So really how our local history fits in with our national history comes through with adding these oral histories to a larger audience.
Well, and I really wish you luck with moving forward with this project, and hopefully very many of our viewers will be inspired to move forward and contact you. Let's talk a little bit about the little library that's been created over at Jermon's Park. We're really grateful for that, but let's alert our viewers to that as well.
Yeah, it's just a little kind of a box on a pole. It was created by John Rossi. Actually, he'd be a good interview. He lives in Congers, and if you've ever seen those little replicas of buildings around...
yeah, he's done several. I have in my office.
Right. I thought, who would be better to create this little free library than John? So I introduced the idea to him, and he built us this little library. And then I called, is it Elaine, the director of parks, and I believe Fred, who's helped us get it in the ground and everything. And I've been going to the pool with my kids this summer, and if I don't go, I just have a box of books in the back of my car, and if I don't go every couple of days, especially after a weekend, you could see that thing's cleared out. So you can just go there, grab a paperback or a hardcover book. Sometimes they're, something that the library had multiple copies of because it was popular last year. Sometimes they're donations, that things that people have given it to us. So we just thought that was a great way to kind of meet the community wherever they are, and it's a great town library partnership, something that I think we can do more of.
Yeah, it really is, and I was really delighted because you did this project. We had a Girl Scout for her gold project did one over at Congers Lake, right outside the pool, but along the path, and that's getting some good use. And maybe we could look at working with you guys to do one over at Lake Nanuet, rather.
No. Actually, I was going to do one at Lake Nanuet, so I said to Elaine, I said, let me call my friends at the Nanuet Library. I don't want to step on any toes because I actually live closer to Nanuet Library. I live in West Nyack, but
Sure.
it's right off the town line there, and sure enough, they said, "Oh no, we'll do it." And so I was at Lake Nanuet this weekend, and they have quite
great.
a nice one there.
Yeah, great.
I was thinking we might put one in at the commuter lot. Maybe.
That would be a great idea.
And
that's something that we really could do. We've got several of them. So, and the books are now the books that go in there are part of the Nanuet Library collection, or they're just donated.
No,
books?
they're just donated. You can just take them. If you want to bring it back, you can bring it back. If you want to keep it, you can keep it.
Right.
So
that's a great opportunity. We should take a look at that and potentially some of our Hamlet Center parks, which might be a really nice opportunity. Congress Station Park right in the downtown heart of Congress and West Nyack, Hamlet Green, places where folks congregate. It might be a nice opportunity. And of course, we've got the one over by Congress Pool, but we now have the dog park. It might be an interesting place right by there to see if we can do something. But happy to work with you on that going forward. But Brian, you've been a fabulous guest. I want to thank you, not just for being a great guest, but I want to thank you for the efforts that you've brought into our communities, the Little Library Project, the oral history, because that's really something that's irreplaceable. And just in a very personal way. Gentleman who lives not too far from me was a Buffalo soldier, Korean War veteran, Charles Butler. And I had been talking with Charles recently, and Charles was actually going to be coming in for us to do a little snippet with him. We had him in once before, and unfortunately he passed away 2 days before the taping of the show. And so that's a lost opportunity. Charles, was about 86 years old, and there are stories that need to be told about the history of our community and different perspectives. And we've got a tremendous history here within Clarkstown and within Rockland County, and it's really important that we try and preserve it. And what you're doing with this oral history project, and hopefully there's going to be a lot of people that have seen this interview and will consider either volunteering to help you do more of them, or volunteering to have their oral history and reflections of living here or growing up here during the different generations and the different eras. Right now, I think we want to try and focus and get some of the people that may not be here, for another 10 or 20 or 30 years, just given their age. But it's important to get anybody, I would think, because there's different eras and different periods of time. And once we have it, we'll always have it. And it'll be an opportunity for people to really have that as a resource in the future for future historians who might want to be looking at doing some type of research, or folks that just want to learn more about the community. So, Brian, thank you for that, because this is really unique. It's something that you've really done a great job on, and I've told folks about it, and we're really delighted any way we can help support it. But thank you for being my guest, and thank you for all your efforts at the library.
Thank you for having me, Supervisor.
Coming up next, Dennis Rodriguez, U.S. Air Force veteran and past New City Fire Department chief. Stay tuned.